shortly thereafter. With that, the next item of business under the Economic Development Authority is the Pledge of Allegiance, so we'd ask folks to stand if you're able. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next on our EDA agenda this evening is approval of tonight's agenda. I'll check with staff. Are there any changes that need to be made to the agenda this evening?
No changes, Mr. President.
All right. Are there any changes that members of the EDA would like made to tonight's EDA agenda this evening? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
Second.
Been moved by Member Groff, seconded by Member Schroeder. Discussion on that motion. Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. We have our agenda for this evening. As is our usual practice with the Economic Development Authority meeting, where we have a council meeting immediately following, we'll go ahead and forego the general public comment at this time and move right into our business items. So that brings us to our first business item, item 5A, which is to consider an acquisition funding agreement and a resolution of support to apply for Livable Communities grant funding from the Met Council for the Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity regarding acquisition of vacant land from Covenant Church for construction of 3 land trust homes. And I'll turn it over to our Housing and Economic Development Program Director, Jeannie Kelsey, to bring this before the board.
Thank you, President Bro. Boy, this is really loud tonight. Thank you, and board members. I just wanted to, in your packet for your consideration, and at the last meeting, you did approve the use of our LAHA dollars to acquire this land between behind Covenant Church. In this packet, you also have for your consideration basically a resolution supporting an application to the Met Council for additional finance gap funds in order to help affordable home ownership. This agreement in your packet is a little different than normal agreements that we've done in the past, but based upon our relationship that we have with Habitat, we felt comfortable to have it as an acquisition funding agreement along with a declaration. The declaration will limit any home to ever be built on the site at 80% or less area median income until the homes do sell, and then they enter into a long-term lease of 99 years for affordability. So I also have Jessica Cole here if you have any questions for Habitat. But the two things, and you can just do it all as one motion, would be to enter into, allowing us to enter into this agreement for the president and also the executive director, as well as a resolution of support for their application to Met Council for local LCA funding.
All right, thank you, Ms. Kelsey. Questions from the board for staff on this request this evening? Member Groff.
So on the 99-year lease, what happens to that lease when it's sold then? Is it just renewed at the same period of time, or is it renewed at 99 years for the new home?
After the 99 years, then it's done.
It's one time 99?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
But during the course of that, if the property changes hands, it continues, right?
Correct,
that
for the
maintains
99 years.
affordability.
So throughout that whole 99 years, it's always affordable to 80% or less AMI.
Got it.
But some of them, when they're 99, they reset to another 99 when they're sold. So
Well, I was going to say, or even when they
Yeah.
change hands during it, that might start another 99 years, but
Exactly.
not in this case. Okay. Other questions? All right, we'll double check if there is anyone from the audience who wishes to speak to this item this evening. It does not appear to be the case. So we'll move then to board consideration of the request. And just to be clear, we've got the agreement. Do we need to take action with respect to the declaration as well? Is it, or just the
It's
agreement?
all as part of one.
A piece?
Yep.
Okay. And then the resolution of support would be a separate part of it.
Yep.
Okay. So looking to the board for a motion potentially?
So moved.
Second.
All right. That's moved by Member Groff, seconded by Member Strawn, to approve the agreement and the declaration, as well as to approve the resolution of support as presented. Discussion on the motion. As the maker of the motion, Member Groff.
I think this adds to our housing stock, and it adds to one of our aspirations of a range of housing for people, and so I support this.
Right. And as the seconder, Member Strawn.
I agree with those sentiments, and I appreciate this continued partnership. And although 99 years isn't forever, it is a very long time and will outlive us for sure. So, thank you.
All right, other discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I would just also note that this is sort of one of the last steps towards this project being brought forward and into development, and so we look forward to that next phase of the project as well. So with that, we've got the motion before us to approve the agreement and declaration as well as the resolution. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye opposed. That passes unanimously. Those items are approved. Thank you, Ms. Kelsey. That then brings us to our next business item under the Economic Development Authority, which is to take a look at our Economic Development Authority Fund 722, which is used to sort of front fund property abatements that are used as part of our nuisance code enforcement. We've got our Community Development Director, Janice Gunlock, with us this evening to bring this for our consideration and discussion. Ms. Gunlock.
Thank you, President Rowe, members of the board. At the February 23rd EDA meeting, we were having a housing programs conversation where this fund came up briefly, and the EDA did request a follow-up discussion. As the mayor noted, Fund 722 is the property abatement fund, and the concern noted at that time was the cash balance of this fund and whether it was at an appropriate level. Since that time, staff has reviewed the abatement activity over the last 3 years. We included a printout of all of those within your packet materials. And we do think that the cash balance is more than is required in order to respond to abatements. I just want to remind you that there are 3 different types of abatements that we engage in. One is council authorized, so those are ones that come before you and we don't do them unless you've authorized them. We also have a couple in our code that are called accelerated abatements. Those are typically tall grass and snowy, icy sidewalks. And then we do have an occasional property owner consented abatement where basically we do the work, but the property owner pays for it and consents for us to do it. So the sole source of expenditures is the cost to perform these abatements. So you'll see a lot of the costs are from the same contractors because our building official has established relationships with these contractors to perform these abatements for us. The sole source of revenues is investment income, and then when people pay for their abatements. So a couple of different ways to do that. Obviously, the property consented ones, we get the money up front and they pay us. Sometimes once we perform the abatement, we invoice them and they do actually pay the invoice. And then, of course, the standard one that we're used to, we do have to assess it against the property tax. And so sometimes those come back in a year that's different from when they were actually conducted. So if you look at that, the numbers don't always completely coincide, but that's the main source of revenue. I want to just emphasize that this fund does not receive any EDA levy support and hasn't in I don't know, at least 10 years. As of last week when I ran it, the cash balance was about $128,000. We think a more reasonable balance is $50,000. We could even maybe get by with a little less, but we thought $50,000 was a good number. And at this time, staff is looking for direction on whether the EDA wishes to allocate any of this excess cash to another fund or another program. I just want to remind you that these funds did originate through the HRA, so the money can only be spent in uses that are authorized HRA uses. Staff has suggested a scenario within your written materials that could fund an existing program that's already being funded by the levy, so you could accomplish some levy reductions if you choose to reprogram it in that way. Essentially, we're suggesting that you could pay for a program that we operate with CEE where we subsidize or pay for energy audits and energy squad visits for our residents who are homeowners in the city. We budget about $10,000 annually for that. The actual cost of that varies from year to year. It just kind of depends on how many are done, but that's a way to secure some levy savings for multiple years if you wish to go that route with the excess cash balance. There may be other options too. We haven't explored those, and so if you have direction for us, we can certainly do that as well. Given the preliminary 2027 budget discussions and preparations are ongoing, if you do have any direction that could affect that budget, it would be helpful to know that now. We do bring the EDA's preliminary budget and levy to you in July for 2027 for your first opportunity to look at it. And then, of course, we come back in September. With that, I will attempt to address any questions you may have. I do have Dave England, our building official here, who manages the property abatement, so I may not be able to answer all of the questions, but I'm certain he will be able to help me if I cannot. That's all I
Thank you,
have.
Ms. Conley. Are there questions from the board on the information that's been provided or any guidance that members might want to provide at this time? Member Groff?
So one of the notes you put in is the staff noted that under an owner consented abatement in 2023, $32,500 was needed to remove a hazardous home. And there is a potential of another one in the city. So you said the seller pays for that, or how does that money get paid out?
So this is a really good question, Board Member Groff. The instance that I mentioned in the report, the actual property owner consented to that one. So we did not hire the contractor to remove the home until we had the cash in hand from the property owner to remove it. The other one that's referenced, and I only brought that up because it kind of plays into why we think 50,000 is a good number. That property owner is unwilling to address the home or remove it. And so we are not in a position where we would recommend removing it with abatement money, just because we may not get that back if the property falls into foreclosure. And I do want to also note, the term hazardous is used kind of loosely. The one that was actually removed, the house was actually falling in on itself. This other one that we're referencing, it's boarded up. There isn't anybody inside it. There aren't animals inside it. It's not falling down. Yes, it's maybe a little bit of a blight to the neighborhood, and I'm sure the immediate neighbors would like it removed, but we don't think it poses an immediate risk like the other one we mentioned that was actually collapsing upon itself.
Thank you.
All right, Member Schroeder.
Yes, thank you for bringing this forward. When you have suggested that we use 10,000 a year for the energy audits, were you thinking moving 50,000 in there or 10,000 per year, or how did you see that money being moved? Would it be a one lump sum to start with, or would you think just do it each year as we come along?
I'm open to whatever the finance director thinks is the best way to do it. I don't know that we need to move the money out of 722. We can just start coding those costs to that fund. It might be easier to track how much we're spending and then do it as a transfer in to the regular general fund levy. I mean, there are multiple ways we could do it. We budget $10,000. There are some years we don't spend all of that. So I would hate to move the money into 725 if we don't spend it all, because then it can go longer.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right, other questions? Member Strawn.
Thank you. I just wanted to say I appreciate the suggestion that the CEE or the energy audits could be a possible use, and that abides by our commitments for this particular funds. We have, as just a reminder to anyone who doesn't recall, we had won an award for our utilization of that program, and I'm sure if we were able to do anything more to kind of push it up again. I know a lot of people had gotten it done, but there's always new folks in town. So I really appreciate the opportunity to continue that and see it as something we continue to do, and maybe not be an additional levy fund. So I appreciate that suggestion, and I would be open to hearing what the finance director's suggestion would be on timing, and maybe over what span of length of time, if not all the funds, maybe some of them.
Right, other questions? I did want to note, just to be clear, that this would only theoretically handle about 5 years of that program, and so then there would either have to be levy funding or some other source of funding. The other thing I just wanted to double check on is I know we had some discussions early this year about EDA finances, and I seem to recall that there were still some potentially open questions about some things, and maybe I'm incorrectly recalling that, but I just wanted to make sure that presuming we provide guidance this evening on this matter, that the staff is in a position to be able to bring forward the suggested or recommended budget for 2027. Are there any other outstanding matters related to the EDA finances that we need to be thinking about or discussing at a subsequent meeting?
I don't think so. I'm looking at Jeannie just to make sure as a cross-reference I'm not missing something. We had that work session related to the budget, and you probably all focused on the EDA levy increase of like 40% because the EDA levy is so small to begin with. So when you add just a little bit of money, that number looks really high. The two items that jump out at me is for 2026, the EDA did move $100,000 of general levy reserve money to fund the budget. So putting that back was one source of the levy being raised for 27. And then the other one is we do anticipate spending more money for legal services beginning in 2027, but I don't believe either of those things is something that could be recouped from excess cash in this fund because this is HRA originated money and that's more operations money. So no, I don't think there are anything else. There was a lot of conversation at February 23rd regarding our housing programs, and we got some really good feedback on a lot of the other funds to sort of fund those programs for at least 2 more years. So I think we might be having some more deeper conversations about funding those programs, looking towards 2028, 2029. But for 2027, I think we're okay.
All right, thank you for bringing me back up to speed on that. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. All right, are there thoughts from the council, or do we want to pursue the recommended path here in some fashion? Council or board? Member Schroeder?
Yeah, I think this is a very good suggestion, and I would support that we go ahead to do this, and you working with the finance director to try to figure out what is the best mechanism to do that. But I think this is a good way to use those funds.
Right. Would you call that a motion?
I would.
Second.
All right.
I'll second it.
All right, it's been moved by Member Schroeder, seconded by Member Groff to proceed with the direction or suggestion that was provided by staff in the materials as it relates to the excess funds above 50,000, I believe, was the amount to remain. Discussion on the motion as the maker, Member Schroeder. All right, as the seconder, Member Groff.
Just thanks for reviewing this. I think it's a good thing for us to do every now and then to look at these funds, and this one makes sense to me to right size it, so appreciate the work.
All right, other discussion? And I should just correct something I said earlier. Actually, I was thinking of the 50,000, but it's the other part that would fund the energy audits and things like that, which would be more than 5 years, of
Right.
course. So, correct my math there. With that, we've got the motion before us. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That passes unanimously, and that action is approved. That then brings us to our final business item under the Economic Development Authority this evening, which is to consider a request for qualifications regarding Economic Development Authority legal services. And once again, Ms. Gundlach will bring this before us for board consideration.
Thank you, President Rowe, members of the board. So in the fourth quarter of 2025, the EDA provided direction to staff on the extension of several professional service agreements with various consultants who provide services to the EDA. The legal services professional service agreement had expired, and at that time, staff suggested that we extend that agreement 1 more year through the end of 2026 with Kennedy and Graven. But during that discussion, it was determined that we should seek proposals before we enter into another agreement for 2027 and beyond. Staff did prepare a proposal to seek legal services for the EDA. I want to note that the EDA last sought proposals in 2018. And a request for qualifications was actually used, and I took that and updated it to reflect the current sort of business of the EDA, because the EDA is actually engaged in a lot more things since 2018. And so that proposal has been updated. I also included a more formal selection process, so that's outlined in section 3. It would include an EDA member helping to score those proposals once they come in, And then I've also suggested a weighted approach to scoring to sort of assist the committee with selecting a member more, a proposal more clearly. Staff would like to get the RFQ out in time to have some preliminary cost estimates back for incorporation into the 2027 budget. As we've mentioned previously, the attorneys that practice in this area is pretty small, and so we intend to directly submit this to the ones that we are aware of. And so we've offered a July 1st deadline, and we think that that's a reasonable time frame based on what we're asking for in the RFQ. So at this time, all we're really asking for is your authorization to release it. Of course, if you have any questions or concerns or additions with it, please let me know. And then we also probably need to know which member of the EDA would like to participate in the scoring, since we would be getting those proposals back before the EDA's next official meeting in mid-July.
All right, thank you, Ms. Gunlock. Are there questions from the board on this request to do the request for qualifications for legal services? All right.
I'd like to nominate Member Groff to be on the search committee.
Oh,
then.
all right. We probably should know whether there's going to be a search committee first, so we should probably take up that action, but duly noted. And I should probably also check, just to be sure, that if there's any comments from people from the public, which it does not appear to be the case at this time. And then, as to the request for qualifications, does council have any suggested changes or improvements, or a motion to proceed as presented?
Motion to proceed is presented.
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Member Strawn, seconded by Member Bauer to proceed with the request for qualifications as outlined in the staff report. Discussion on that motion. Member Strawn is the maker.
It sounds well thought out and makes a lot of sense based on the information presented.
All right, as the seconder, Member Bauer.
And I'll just add that I appreciate your weighted scoring.
All right, other discussion on the motion? And I would just note that, I think our expectation is probably that the costs are higher than what have been used to, although as we noted, it's also not like a retainer type service. It's sort of an as-needed service, so we have some control over our legal costs. So I think it does make sense to see what is out there in the marketplace as per our own policy as a city regarding contracted services. So I'm supportive. With that, we've got the motion before us. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye opposed. That passes unanimously. That request to request qualifications is approved. Are there other board members interested in serving on the committee or refusal to serve from Councilmember Groff?
I mean, if there's someone else interested, please speak up. I'm not married to this, but I did do it once before. I
On
know
the
what
legal
process is.
services, right, for the city. Other interested parties? All right, I think by
So-
default, you are the one.
It's a contested.
Member Groff? All right. I believe that concludes our business for the EDA this evening. I don't see anything else on the agenda. The only other item before us then would be a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Member Schroeder, seconded by Member Bauer. To adjourn, no discussion on a motion to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That passes unanimously, and we are adjourned at 6:25 PM. Stay tuned. We'll be transitioning to the council meeting. It'll take a few moments. All right, I hereby call to order the Roseville City Council meeting for Monday, May 11th, 2026. It is approximately 6:27 p.m., and the roll call will stand as it was for the EDA meeting prior to this, with all members present. Once again, we've got our city attorney, Greta Bjerknes, with us this evening on my right, and as usual, our city manager, Pat Trudgeon, on my left at the end of the dais, and we will be introducing staff and other participants as agenda items come up on the meeting. We did the Pledge of Allegiance with the EDA meeting, so we can forego that a second time this evening. We then need to look at approving tonight's agenda. It's a very brief agenda, but we'll double check if there are any changes that need to be made, either from a staff or council perspective.
No changes, Mr. Chair.
All right, does not appear to be the case. With that, is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second?
All right, it's been moved by Councilmember Schroeder, seconded by Councilmember Strawn, to approve tonight's agenda. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. We have our agenda for this evening. Next on the agenda then would be general public comment. This is an opportunity for members of the public to speak on items that are not on this evening's agenda, but may be related to city business or of interest to people in the community. It does not appear to be the case that we have members of the public with us this evening to speak. And so on that presumption, I'm not seeing anybody leaping forward to speak, so we'll move then to the rest of our agenda. And that then brings us to our business items. Our first business item, and some might say the main event this evening, others may disagree, is the receipt of our annual comprehensive financial report, as well as our auditor communications and reports and information on compliance for our fiscal year ending December 31st, 2025. We have our Finance Director, Sam Magarano, with us this evening, who will also introduce our auditor for the presentation of the audit this evening. Hello and welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, member of the council. Indeed, we have this evening with us Rebecca Peterson from Redpath & Company. They are the city's financial auditors, and she'll be walking us through a quick presentation of the financial results for 2025. After the presentation, city staff will be available for questions, as well as the city auditors. So with that, I'm going to let Rebecca take over on the presentation. Do we have the presentation by any chance?
Yeah, did you load it up?
See, we have something here.
Perhaps while Mr. Magarano is loading it up, Ms. Peterson, if you could just swing the microphone a little bit more directly facing you. There we go. It's a directional thing, so it does not always pick up as well if it's not pointing right at you. So appreciate that.
Yeah, not a problem.
I'm just trying to vamp a little bit while he's doing the presentation.
Start with the introduction.
Yeah. Well, Mayor and council members, thank you for having me here. While they work on getting it pulled up, I just want to remind you, I know you've heard me say it before, but we work closely with city staff, but we really do work for you. So as I'm speaking, if you have questions, please feel free to stop me, interrupt me. And even after the meeting's over tonight, if you want to reach out afterwards, I'm always available.
Sorry for that. I thought we would have it ready here, but get that quickly pulled up. There we go.
I guess the best you're gonna get.
I can present from there. That will work fine. We'll just go through
We
all
got
of
it.
that.
Okay.
Perfect.
I can walk through this.
As we get started tonight, before we start talking about current year information, I just want to call out that last year, as in years past, the city submitted its 2024 financial statements to the GFOA Award for Excellence in Financial Reporting. And once again, the city's financial statements were awarded the award. It recognizes excellence in financial reporting, comprehensiveness in your financial reporting, and it's something that the bond rating agencies look for. So it's a positive thing that the city received the award. There were 4 reports that we issued in conjunction with the audit this year. I'll go through a summary of each of the reports. And then I just want to mention that in past years, you've likely seen me present 5 reports. There is a report on federal compliance, or the single audit report. That is an audit that's required anytime the city expends over a certain threshold of federal funds in a given year. This year, the threshold is $1 million, and the city didn't hit that limit, so there was no single audit required this year, which is why there's one less report than in the past. The first report that we issue in conjunction with the audit is an opinion on the financial statements. This is really the primary purpose of the audit. And what it is us opining on your financial statements, saying, yes, they are fairly stated. Maybe not exactly correct to the dollar. As we've talked about in the past, it would be cost and time prohibitive for me to look at every single transaction that you enter into. But we look at a sample of transactions and we follow audit standards and perform a risk assessment so that we look at the riskier areas and spend more of our time on what we consider the riskier areas of the audit. The result this year is that we're able to issue a clean, unmodified opinion on the 2025 financial statements, which is the result you would want. The next report that we issue in conjunction with the audit is a report on internal control. Now, as part of our audit, we don't audit the city's internal control, but we gain an understanding of the processes and the procedures that are in place in order for us to plan our audit. And if anything comes to our attention during that planning, that one, we've identified a deficiency in internal control, or somewhere where we think that there's opportunity for improvement in internal control, we would identify it in this report. And when we look at these things, we're looking at preventative controls, things that prevent errors from entering the finance system, and then also detective controls, processes that are in place to detect errors if they do occur. And then we maintain an awareness of ongoing oversight by management. What our engagement over internal controls is not a fraud review. That's a question I've received a lot this year from various governing bodies, just because of the nature of what's going on in the environment around us. And during the course of our testing, if we saw evidence of fraud, we would certainly pursue that and we would alert you to it. But looking for fraud is not the primary purpose of our audit. And so I want to make sure you as a governing body understand that. The result this year is that we've reported 2 internal control findings. And I think I'm going to start with the bottom one first, internal controls over disbursements. During the course of our testing, we identified a number of small errors, some items that where an individual had maybe a credit card transaction that was not approved by their supervisor, maybe some insufficient supporting documentation, those types of things, small dollar amounts, but the number when layered on top of each other we felt was worth reporting. And so city staff has already taken steps to correct and address those processes so that they can be improved moving forward. That type of finding is a pretty common finding for all units of local government, cities included. The first finding on the list is financial statement corrections. During our audit, any time that there is a correction to the financial statements that is material in nature, we need to consider if it needs to be reported as a finding. This year, there was an error correction to last year's financial statements. More, historically, we've called that a prior period adjustment. For governmental financial reporting, that terminology has gone away, but if you're familiar with the term prior period adjustment, it was a prior period adjustment. And the source of that was a very large invoice that the city received in 2024, and it was not paid until 2026. The invoice or combination of invoices themselves were over $1 million. And when we look at the funds that needed to pay those invoices, about $977,000, I think, was allocated to the water fund, which was material to that fund. And so it was a payment that should have occurred in 2020 or 2024, at least allocated to 2024, that wasn't identified to 2026. So we needed to restate beginning numbers and make sure that that expense was reflected there. It is unusual because normally if an organization has an invoice go unpaid for $1 million, the person you're supposed to pay it to will reach out and ask, why haven't you paid me? And my understanding is that did not occur in this instance, which is why it went undetected for so long. But the invoice was identified in early 2026 and subsequently paid. As we move on to the next report, you'll see that it also impacted a legal compliance finding. The next report that we issue in conjunction with the audit is our report on legal compliance. And I always like to remind you that we're accountants, not attorneys, so we're looking at this from an accounting perspective. But the Office of the State Auditor has a series of requirements that they ask us to look at in conjunction with our audit in these various areas. And so we select a sample of transactions and look for adherence to state statutes. One of the items that we're looking at is prompt payment of local government bills. The Office of the State Auditor wants to make sure that local governments are paying their bills timely, not refusing to pay their vendors and whatnot. And in this instance, there was clearly a lack of prompt payment as far as the timing of payment of this large contractor or construction invoice. So that resulted in a legal compliance finding as well, but all related to the same issue. And finally, the final report that we issue in conjunction with the audit is a communication to those charged with governance. This is that standard templated letter from us as the auditors to you as governance. And there's certain areas that are customized to the city, and so I've just called those out for your attention. The first one is if there's any accounting policies used or changed in this year compared to the prior year, we're required to notify you of that. There was a slight increase in the capitalization threshold. And when we talk about capitalization threshold, we're looking at when the city purchases assets, what's the dollar amount of those assets that go on the city's balance sheet to be depreciated over time versus expensed immediately. As time goes on, inherently organizations need to increase that threshold. What used to be $500 might now be $50,000 for some organizations, just depending on the nature of things. So pretty routine that I'm seeing those thresholds increase over time. The next item that we have here is accounting estimates. Just a reminder that some of the numbers in the financial statements really are estimates. And I have a couple significant ones identified here. The first one is OPEB. OPEB stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits. It's really the cost of the city having employees that are able to retire from the city. State statute requires you to allow your retirees to stay on your health insurance until they're Medicare eligible. And that inherently increases health insurance premiums for the city as a whole. If you picture a health insurance policy full of 25-year-olds versus a health insurance policy full of 65-year-olds, there's going to be a difference. The GASB, the Government Accounting Standards Board, says that there is an inherent difference in that cost, and they ask local governments to have an actuary calculate what that is. And so for the city, the actuarially determined liability at the end of 2025 was about $1.5 million. That's something you're not actually going to have to pay on. It's just something that's absorbed into your health insurance premiums over time. The second liability I have on here is also actuarially determined. It's the para net pension liability, and this is the cost of city employees participating in the state para pension plan. Para hires an actuary to calculate the net pension liability of their pension as a whole, and then allocates that liability out to all participating employers. The city's share for 2025 was just over $12 million. And I identified a history of what that liability was over time because you can see it swings dramatically based on actuarial assumptions and market conditions. But again, this is not something that PARA is going to come asking for $12 million. The city pays on it with your regular payroll contributions. Other items of significance that we communicate in this letter is no difficulties encountered in performing the audit. Staff were great to work with. Corrected and uncorrected misstatements. There's a section that addresses any corrected or uncorrected misstatements. Obviously, that $1 million invoice is part of that. No disagreements with management. And then other matters. If there's anything else that came to our attention during the course of the audit that we felt was important to communicate that didn't fit in any other bucket, we would communicate it here. And this year we do have one item identified. One of the things that we look at during the course of our audit is the city's cash deposits. There's a state statute that says that your cash deposits need to be insured by FDIC, and if you exceed those insurance levels, you need to have collateral pledged from your financial institution to cover them in event of failure to protect the city's assets. The city changed banks after year end. And so when we were trying to test the amount of collateral you had at the year end 2025, we were unable to do so. The bank was unwilling to provide some of that documentation. And so I don't have any concerns. We are now well into 2026. The city has not lost cash, but just know it's something we weren't able to test at the end of the year. And so that is the only other matter we have identified in the report. And that, as far as results of our reports, is what I have prepared for you all. I have some other slides on financial, summary information, but I want to pause and see if there's any questions you have before I move on.
Right, questions from the council? Councilmember Schroeder.
Yes, under the Minnesota Legal Compliance Report, who else gets that besides us?
It's shared with the city, and then I believe the OSA can have a copy of it to the Office of the State Auditor. It's at the conclusion of the audit, the city has to upload your financial reports into a system called SAFES, and I believe it's part of that upload.
And is there any consequence of us having an item on here? Is there any kind of consequence as in someone coming in and looking at it, or anything we need to do, or how does that work?
So I can't speak for the Office of the State Auditor. In my experience, something like this, if the state auditor ever even looked at it, they would say, okay, now you know better, do better, and move on. Where it really comes to light is if it was extremely pervasive. If you had 10 findings, there was evidence of fraud, that's when you're going to hear from the state auditor. A legal compliance finding is extremely common, and it's something you correct and move on.
Great, thank you. And I do have a question on the water fund, but maybe that could go into, the correction we did. I think that might, a question maybe to put in the parking lot for our finance director to ask is, in case I forget, is why does this not affect the rates for the residents, that this correction, why doesn't that make the rates go up or down? I've had a couple of conversations with our finance director, but I think it's important enough for him to be able to let the residents also know his answer to that.
So maybe that can be incorporated into the presentation
Yep.
on the financials.
Great. Maybe I'll go through my financial summary, and then maybe you can come up and join. That's great.
Any other questions on compliance?
I don't know if
Councilmember
it is a question on that or not, but were there any penalties or late fees on that amount of money that was held for a year?
So the vendor is able to ask for interest. The state statute does allow for that. I'd look to the finance director to see if not. So.
Wow. It's interesting.
Yeah.
It's Ramsey County provider.
I see.
So they invoice us for that.
Thank
So
you.
just so that members of the public watching at home know that was an invoice from Ramsey County, and so Ramsey County is not imposing penalties on us, which is nice of them.
Yeah.
All right.
Next up, I just have a high-level financial summary of overall financial results for the year. I have it broken out here by governmental funds. Just as a refresher, the city has two main fund types. Business-type funds are generally intended to be self-sustaining. Governmental funds are those funds that might be funded by property taxes or grants that really need external funding sources. We've got our general fund, special revenue funds, debt service funds, and capital project funds. If you look at the second column from the right, the increase and decrease in fund balance, that really tells you what changed over the course of the year. Looking at the bottom, your capital project funds, you will see that there is a significant increase in fund balance for your capital project funds of about $4 million. There was some debt issuances, some funds issued to do construction projects that haven't completed yet, and so that's really what that represents. Looking at the general fund, you'll see that there was an increase of just under $500,000. And that, I'm going to jump to the next slide here where I have a summary of budget to actual. That is really coming in right here. We've got a transfer in of $936,000 into the fund where only $200,000 was budgeted. And that is primarily money coming from the License Center. Coming into the fund to help subsidize it and keep your fund balance at a level that it needs to be. And then I'll just call out, because there's some large budget variances here. If you look at the budget variance for both revenues and expenditures, you'll see over $1 million. This really relates to how the city is handling charging, among other things, but this is the most significant, charging for public safety time. The city, if we have police officers that are doing some contract work, the city has started charging the external parties for that and also absorbing the OT costs internally. And so we've got offsetting revenues and expenditures that are above budget. So these really net out from one activity, just changing how it's been done in the past. But this increase in fund balance and the funding from the License Center leads us into looking at the fund balance of the general fund itself. There's certain segments of general fund balance that are reserved for certain things. About 35,000 of it we consider non-spendable. It relates to prepaid assets, maybe invoices that were paid ahead of time. You can't use that money for anything else because you already spent it on something. So you've got $35,000 tied up in non-spendable amounts. There's certain items that are restricted. Funds that you've received from external parties that you can only spend on certain items. So there's some law enforcement restrictions and some public safety aid restrictions that we have. And then there's the remaining fund balance. We've got about $640,000 that's assigned for professional services. And then just under $10 million that's unassigned but segmented for working capital. What is not on here this year that you've seen in the past is a general reserve outside of these amounts. My understanding is that was completely drained this year in 2025. So at the end of the year, there's no extra reserves. The city does have a fund balance policy to maintain an unassigned fund balance between 35 and 50% of next year's general fund expenditures. And you are meeting that. You're at about 35.4%, but at the very bottom, so there's no reserves. And as you head into the next budget cycle, that's something really important to pay attention to because expenses aren't getting less, right? The cost of things continue to increase. And so if you keep this fund balance at this level, but your expenditures increase, at some point you won't have that coverage of 35%. And this is important for a number of reasons to make sure that you have sufficient cash flow in between property tax payments, being able to handle unexpected expenditures, those types of things. So something to watch as you head into your budget cycle. Here I just have a quick trend of governmental funds revenue. What's funding your governmental funds? And this large blue bar at the bottom is your property taxes and assessments. And then the next red one up is your charges for services. So you can see the mix of revenue that is funding your governmental fund operations. Moving on to business type funds. The graphs that I have here show your operating expenses as the blue bar and your operating revenues as the line. And in your business type funds, you want your operating revenues to more than cover your operating expenses. Capital, especially for your utility infrastructure, is extremely expensive. And so you need to have a gap between the money you're bringing in and the money that's going out the door to save for repairs, improvements, and replacements. With the rate study that was done a number of years ago, you can see back in 21 and 22, you weren't covering your operating expenses. Moving forward, you are covering operating expenses, but the gap is not quite as large as maybe I would like it to be, and that's something that we've talked about and I think will be addressed going forward, but something to be aware of. Looking at the sewer fund, that gap between your operating revenue and your operating expenses continues to be healthy and sufficient to cover your capital needs. Storm drainage, this fund inherently across all cities tends to fluctuate based on what's happening within the city. But again, you have a nice gap between your operating expenses and your operating revenues, and probably the opportunity to plan for use of some of those funds as time goes on. And finally, we have the golf course. Here for the operating expenses, I've segmented out depreciation. Recreational facilities inherently struggle to cover their costs. And so you can see that your operating revenue covered all of your operating expenses for 2025 except for depreciation. And that's really the best you can hope for in a recreational facility. You know, the infrastructure needs aren't as great as maybe a water and sewer system, so the gap doesn't need to be as big. And oftentimes when you do have capital needs, most cities will end up having to transfer in funds from other sources. But overall, I would say that it's a healthy recreational facility looking at the results of revenue and expenses this year. And finally, solid waste. You can see that I have two lines here. One is representing the blue line. It includes some grants that the city receives to help fund operations. And the significant change in 2025 comes in with the change in how those waste and recycling bins are handled. This was a planned change here. And I believe that should be my last one. Yep. So that's all I have pre-planned for you, but happy to answer any other questions that may have come up.
All right, and maybe it's a good opportunity for the answer to Councilmember Schroeder's question about the water fund and water ratepayers and how that will look.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. I've received that question throughout the week as well from some of you. But why is that not as important to the water rates that were proposed? First of all, when water rates are determined, we're really looking at a long-term plan. We're not really looking for the rates only for the next year. The cash is insignificant. It's of significant importance with the utility funds or the business funds, if you would, because that kind of shows the cash flow. For this instance, not paying this invoice timely in 2024, we had more cash at that point. However, that cash was hit our account in 2026. So big picture here, when we determine our rates, we're really looking at all the capital needs for the next probably 10, 15 years. We're actually doing a 20-year CIP for utility funds as well. So when we determine rates, we're also considering that, which is a huge part of expenses in those funds, but also the cash flow, right? So when we look at the 2024, the issue wasn't that we didn't have the cash there. That invoice, the best case scenario, would have decreased cash in 2025 if it was collected timely, not in 2024. So the issue with this transaction was not a cash impact, was a understatement of liabilities at year end. So that's not a cash impact. So it's a debit to your expenses, which is an expense, and a credit to your liabilities. That would have been the journal entry that we would have had to post. And the cash ideally would have hit 2025. So for 2025 rates to be set, you would have had to determine that in 2024, where cash would have been the same either way. So there would have been no impact to your recommended rate increases for 2025. That makes sense? Am I following? And also, again, long term, we're not going to look year after year. So cash was good in 2024. 2025 and was overstated because then it would have hit in 2025, but it resolved itself in 2026. And we're really looking at a 10, 15, 20-year projections when we look at the rates. At least I do. I'm working with others this year to see how that works for them. So
maybe for members of the public, we'll see if this analogy is workable for this situation. So we saved up the money for that expenditure prior to 2024, or most of it anyway. And so really, it was there in our checking account, if that's what we want to call it, to be spent and had planned to be spent and just wasn't spent. And in the world of accounting, we should have accounted for the fact that we had that liability to pay that amount during the year that it was incurred, and we had not done that. And so it's not that we didn't have the money, it's that we didn't account for the liability that the city had to pay that amount.
Yeah, and when we account for the projects, again, this was a project in conjunction with the county. We assume in those long-range planning that those expenses will be paid. So when we make an assumption for utility rate increases, we look at operating cost, also capital cost, and we put those in relation to the cash. So those expenses would have been completely accounted for in that evaluation to begin with. So we weren't really looking at the timing when it hits our cash. We're actually looking at the timing of the long-range plan when those expenses are going to hit either 2024, 25, 26. Doesn't really matter when we cut the check, but when we do a long-range planning, we're accounting for those expenses as happening 100%. So for that purpose of determining rates, the timing when we cut the check shouldn't have mattered at all.
Got it.
Yep.
All right. Other questions from the council? Check if there's anyone from the public who wishes to speak. It doesn't appear to be the case. And I do believe we have a requested action, which I believe is to receive the financial report for 2025, unless I'm mistaken on that. All right, so that would be an
Motion to
appropriate motion.
accept the financial report as
Second?
presented.
Been moved by Councilmember Strawn, seconded by Councilmember Schroeder to accept the 2025 financial report as presented. Any discussion on that motion as the maker, Councilmember Strawn?
I appreciate the presentation and I appreciate the longevity. So we've seen this and understand the process and looking forward to seeing how we can incorporate this into our next year's planning and looking forward to having Mr. Mangaranu on board for that.
Is that right? As the seconder, Councilmember Schroeder?
Yes, I want to say I thought this audit had a few more pieces in it that I appreciated. Some of the findings, and I know with some of the corrections that our finance director and our city manager are working to make sure our policies and procedures are in place. There will be mistakes made, and it's how we correct that is the important part. So that was the good part about that. I also appreciated all the interaction between the city manager and the finance director and all the questions I had once I got this. I appreciate getting it out a little bit early so I could actually study it a bit. So on that side, and every year I'm looking forward to improving on it. So this year we did have some improvements. So thank you.
Right, other discussion on the motion? Councilmember Groff?
I would really echo that. I thought the report was thorough. I saw some changes from the last few years, and I thought that was clear. I thought the report was done in a way that was digestible for people who don't live with numbers every day. If they made the effort, they could read through this and get a lot of good information about how the city works. And I think the changes that you're planning to make are really important for the future, and I appreciate those.
Thank you. All right, and Councilmember Bauer?
As noted in the audit report, some, issues with internal controls, and I know that there's efforts already taking place to improve those, even before I believe the audit was coming out. So I look forward to watching the Finance Commission as you discuss those with the Finance Commission.
All right, and I'm certainly supportive of accepting the comprehensive financial report. And I think that not only will mistakes be made, but I think that part of putting the controls in place is to try to catch them earlier and try to hopefully develop procedures that minimize mistakes in the first place, because certainly that's part of the objective as well as stewards of the people's money. The fortunate thing is that by catching things early, that we can make the corrections and do the things we need to do to keep the finances of the city in good shape. So that's why we put those types of procedures in place and why we test them and why we adjust them as need be. So once again, we've got the motion before us to accept our 2025 comprehensive financial report. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye opposed. That passes unanimously, and that's accepted. And thank you again, Ms. Peterson, for your report this year, and we look forward to the process next time around.
Thank you for having
Thank
me.
you. All right. Next on our agenda, we have our second business item this evening is item 7B, which is to consider the issuance of a 2026 community survey and some discussion as it relates to that. And so I'll turn it over to our Assistant City Manager, Rebecca Olson, to bring this before the council for our discussion and consideration.
Thank
Ms.
you,
Olson.
Mayor, council members. As part of our commitment to data-informed decision-making and aligning our work with our strategic plan, tonight staff is bringing before you for consideration some proposed updates to the community survey with the intent to really strengthen how we're measuring progress on our strategic plan and aligning with our vision of being a vibrant, safe, and inclusive community. So a little bit of background. So our community survey has historically served as one of our important tools to measure resident satisfaction. We identify different community priorities and concerns through the community survey. We have a core set of questions that we maintain throughout this survey that helps us track trends over time. And Also, we plan to continue to use this to help inform our strategic planning moving forward, helps inform some of our budget decisions, and then can also help us, as I mentioned previously, measure that progress towards those goals that we've outlined. So we have conducted community surveys basically since 2014, possibly even before that. This is back on the records that I have. But typically, it is roughly every 2 years. We did have a short break during those COVID years. We did one in 2014, 2016, 2018, 2020, and then the most recent one was in 2024. As I mentioned, we use this as our consistent benchmarking over time. So we've used the same survey company throughout these years, and we can track those progress for each of those questions over time. A little bit on our survey methodology, just because I know this does come up frequently. There are a variety of ways to do it. We do a statistically valid sample. We use 400 residents that are done with a margin of error, roughly 5%, plus or minus 5%. Our residents is representative of our demographics. So, for example, if we have 50% or 52% women, we try to get 52% of the random sample to be reflective of that demographic as well as other demographics. And then in addition, it is a phone survey. We often get questions on whether it is just landlines. It does include cell phone surveys or cell phones in the survey. And the current survey is 130 questions. It does include those demographic questions. The average time it takes, the last survey in 2024 was about 22 minutes to complete. And then as I've stated, we do keep those core questions to help with our trend analysis. So this year, one of the primary opportunities we have with the 2026 survey is to really strengthen that alignment with our strategic plan to measure a lot of the qualitative success indicators that we have in our goals. And it can provide some actionable data that we can use moving forward. And I think I get into this, the next slide here. So with our strategic plan, we have a variety of success indicators that are both quantitative and qualitative. And we these are some examples, you'll see this slide and the next slide, of what some of those qualitative success indicators look like. And it is around the sentiment. So this community survey is only one of the tools that we have that we can measure this, but it is a really large tool that we use. And so hoping to really be able to use some of the feedback that we get from the community survey to give us a baseline moving forward of our strategic plan. You'll see in here, for example, when we talk about some of the recommended changes for your consideration, not every priority area in our community survey has any recommendations for changes, and a lot of that is because we're already tracking some of those. So for example, our Parks and Natural Environment priority area in our strategic plan, a couple of the qualitative success indicators are around our parks programs and how they positively contribute to residents' quality of life. We already asked that question. So there are some questions that we're already using that we can use moving forward with our strategic plan. So this slide and the next slide are really just showing you what some of those success indicators look like. Starting on this slide, I'm going to come back to this slide, but I want to just give you kind of the high-level overview, and then we'll dive into a lot of the very specific questions, recommendations, kind of walk you through so that you can provide your feedback. There are 3 areas that staff is looking at. One is to take a look at the survey. Are there any questions that we could potentially remove that might not be timely any longer? And there were, excuse me, a couple of them were related to the new Cedar Home building, given that that is almost 10 years old now. Feedback from our Park and Rec director is that we could probably eliminate some of those questions. We have other ways to gather that data that's in the survey. And then there were several questions in the 2024 survey that were related specifically to our sales tax referendum. And so we are recommending potentially eliminating those. Then there's a group of questions that are currently in our survey that we thought we could potentially tweak to get more at those success indicators tied to our strategic plan. One thing I'll highlight, you'll probably hear me say this multiple times, is that there's nobody on staff that is a statistically valid survey question writer. And so what we're planning to do is bring back council's feedback on the areas specifically that you are looking to get feedback on through the survey, and help ask our survey provider to give us those questions so that it's written in an appropriate manner so that it can be statistically valid. There is no bias, and it's something that would be appropriately done. And in the past, what we've done is we've brought those questions to you, sent it out to you, and if there's any feedback that you need to provide, we can bring it back to a council meeting. So that's where you'll hear me say these might be sample questions, but they aren't necessarily specifically worded exactly as what the end result might be. And then there's some new questions that we're looking to potentially ask. As I mentioned, we are eliminating, hopefully, a couple of the ones related to the sales tax referendum, and that gives us a little bit more capacity if there are specific questions related to the strategic plan. But also, there might be things that council is interested in getting feedback on from the community that isn't here or isn't specifically tied to the strategic plan. So there is a little bit of flexibility moving forward with questions that you may want to consider as well. I'm going to skip the next couple of slides, and we're going to come back to those. But I wanted to just give you a brief overview of what the cost is. So the 2026 budget did allocate dollars for a community survey. We have enough in there for the base survey for 130 questions, which is $28,000 based on the quote from the survey company. If we plan to add any questions above and beyond that 130, it is $250 per question. We did add in with the intent that there might be some flexibility needed to tie things to our strategic plan. So we have some dollars in there to potentially add a few extra questions that is appropriate in the 2026 budget. And then lastly, wanted to really just kind of give you a timeline of what this might look like. So our hope was that we could use some of the results that come out of this survey to help inform any decisions that the city manager's recommended budget might take into account. And so we backtracked into that, thinking that if he presents his budget in August, looking to have results presented to you as a council in July, meaning the survey would be conducted in June, and we would get feedback to our survey company sometime by the end of this month for the finalization. Then moving forward, it says September, but it's kind of a moving forward look ahead, is we would use the data that we've gathered through this survey to really set that baseline for our strategic plan. And as we look to develop work plans tied specifically to the strategic plan and budget, moving forward in 2027, we would have at least a data point that we could reference and where we want to go from there. So here is where I can walk through the specific questions that we're looking at, that the leadership team kind of came up with and looked through. And then again, I'm looking for council feedback on those questions, but also other thoughts on the community survey. So with that, as I mentioned, these are the three categories. I can do one of two things. I can walk through them one by one, or I can go through them all at once, and then you guys can provide feedback. You just let me know what you'd prefer. So I'm going to pull up the actual survey so you can see the questions, if that works.
All right. And maybe it does make sense to take each in turn, the remove, the edit, and the new.
Yeah, the sections.
All right.
Okay, I'm going to get my notes here quick so I have them handy. Okay, so as I mentioned, the first group was removing questions 26 through 28. All right, hang on here, that. I'm not sure the screen changed. Let's see.
Yeah, I'm not sure how you switch between them
I'm
necessarily.
not sure either. We're going to,
Why would you take out 27?
let me just pull it up real quick and see if we can. There we go. So this was based on the recommendation of our Parks Director. he felt that there were already ways that these are measured, in addition to the fact that Cedar Home is no longer new. So they have other ways that they measure some of this sentiment. And so his recommendation was to remove 26, 27, and 28 is kind of a follow-up to the previous question.
I just thought maybe it would be helpful to have something that was like, do you know how to rent? Do you know how you would go about getting, renting one of the facilities, or if that was a barrier in how people get to that? So I appreciate 27 is very similar to 29, but maybe something that's kind of a middle ground.
I'm a little concerned on that one, especially given that the numbers are so low. No is 64%. They've not used those houses. I was hoping that in the next survey it would have come up a little bit. Maybe we can find that number out some other way. You said that he has some other ways of tracking those statistics.
But if they don't know about it, what's going to help them know about it?
Right.
Well, certainly answering a survey question may or may not help people know about it, too.
That's true, too.
Given
yeah.
that it's only 400
people, yeah.
households.
And the rest of them don't see these unless they look at the packet.
I think the other thing about it is that the questions are actually not just about the Cedar Home community building,
No.
but also the other park buildings,
Right.
which are less new than the Cedar Home building at this point. And so, yeah, I don't know that it's super important to have those in there, but I appreciate the feedback. Are there other thoughts from council members?
I don't know, I think I like having them. I mean, just changing dropping from the newer Cedar Home and updating, removing that part. But
Just call them park buildings.
yeah, just park buildings. I mean, I do like to see the trend, as Councilmember Groff pointed out, to see how that's progressing and how our communications about these opportunities. And I would think that would be helpful for the Parks Department as well to see how effective their communications are. So I'd be in favor of just keeping them.
Well, I think
just
you
like
could remove 26 and 28, because you could do a satisfaction survey of the people who actually use them. But you could say, have you visited or used one of the buildings? And then in 29, would you consider using again? And then, and do you know how to rent one if you were interested? I think we don't need to talk to the people who've already rented them about whether or not they're going to provide a satisfaction survey in another way. But I still think it would be helpful for us to ask if they know they exist or how they could use them, or that they're available for anyone who wanted to use them.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would be fine with leaving it to staff to figure out what to do there, as long as we can, the new survey results, we can use that data and match it against the previous one to show what the trend is.
Yeah.
If that requires you to keep the same questions and just update them, fine. If you can, update them new, it comes, as mentioned here, that's fine too. But just as long as we can infer a trend, or at least compare to previous years, a trend.
So it sounds like there's, without having heard from all the council members necessarily, that there's at least sufficient consensus to keep.
I think you
those
could, like some of them, I think you could condense it down, not so many questions. And I think, again, figuring out how to word it, there's a number of them. I don't know if you need like 30 in there, some of them. So yeah, I would say it's more trying to get that trend feel and just, I leave it to the staff that you understand we're trying to see the trend and figure out which questions and then how to reword it. Obviously, take out new,
Yeah.
whatever
Right.
it is, but yeah.
Yeah, they might think we've replaced it again.
Yeah.
It's really wonderful.
Yes, there we go. So just to clarify from the council's perspective, so 26 is the "Are you aware?" question. How did we feel about the 26 "Are you aware?" question?
Couldn't it just be 27? Have
Well,
you
no, that's what I'm saying. Do we keep 26 or
I think
or
we could
not?
get rid of 26 and have 27 because
I just want to make sure I
would-
understand the
Yeah.
input from the
27
council.
would give me the information I was looking for.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that,
And I think 28 could be eliminated because it should be asked.
we can figure that out a different way
Yeah.
as opposed to the survey? Because actually, that's going to be a lot less than
Right.
400 households at that point.
Yeah.
And obviously, we've gotten pretty good remarks or reviews from the ones who did respond. And then was 29 felt that that's similar to 28 in terms of we can get that information elsewise, or?
Yeah, I would think you could take 20, 29 and
Yeah.
20
And 30 out.
26, 28, 29, and 30.
Yeah, so just keep
27.
27.
Yeah.
All right. So we're just,
And-
what we're measuring is awareness.
Right.
Yeah.
And then maybe, do you know how you would, are you aware of how you would go about renting them if you were interested, or, I don't know, just,
Well, we haven't asked that before.
but it may be a part of why people haven't used them too. So wouldn't it be helpful to know why?
What was the response previously? It was, why won't you use it? We don't need to. 100%.
Oh.
So which is, I mean, if you don't need to use the building, you're not going to need to use the building,
True.
I guess.
Okay.
So, I don't know.
Okay.
That was kind of my thought on it.
Okay, yeah.
So 27
27.
stays.
Yeah, I think so.
Yep.
All right.
So then the next set of questions that are under consideration is questions 56 through 63. So it starts with this intro related to the sales tax referendum, and it is questions directly related to that ballot question that was on the ballot.
Yeah.
So 56, 57, 58, 59,
Oh, yeah.
60, 61, 62, and 63.
Yeah. I think those can be removed.
I don't know that we're planning to have another referendum anytime soon.
I don't think we are, no.
All right.
And if we are, we have to do another survey by then.
There's a lot of steps to go through anyway before we get to that point. Okay.
Okay, so then the next section is questions for potential edits. And we're going to go back to question 9. Question 9. So this one, the current question is, please tell me which of the following do you feel the closest connection to? The city of Roseville as a whole, your neighborhood, your school district, or something else. So the conversation at the leadership level was that maybe this is a good question that we could tie to our city vision, in engaging our community to say how. I'm sorry, I have to look up my notes here. Oops. So this one would be, again, this is just a sample of the question, but to what extent do you believe Roseville is a vibrant, safe, and inclusive community, with a follow-up of what would most improve Roseville's ability to be a vibrant, safe, and inclusive community? I have no idea if that is the appropriate way to word it, but the intent was to maybe tie it towards the city's vision to see what the community feels if we're achieving this vision. So that's the intent of this questions edit. So looking for council feedback on whether keeping the current language of that question is still valuable, which we can, or if an additional question or an edit of that question is appropriate.
Does it make sense to have it all as one question? I could see someone maybe saying like, it's vibrant and inclusive, but I don't feel safe. I mean, do you feel like you need to break that up into multiple questions? And maybe not. I think there's other places in the survey where we cover safe. I don't know about vibrant or inclusive off the top of my head. But that might be
Councilmember-
something that you want to look at.
That's a great suggestion. That's something that has come up also, of do we break it out individually between, exactly as you said. There are some proposed questions that are under the new section related to safe. So maybe towards the end, we can kind of get the sentiment of which questions we want to ask, and does it make sense to split them out? Or
Well, just as an example, question 10 is a question about how welcome you feel in the community, and that's sort of related to inclusiveness in some senses. So there may be some ways to look even at other existing questions to like was said, we definitely have questions about feeling safe, and maybe there's ways to look at the vibrancy and inclusiveness as well with either modifications to existing questions or new questions.
I'm kind of curious on 4. It mentions neighborhoods and housing. And it's kind of funny, in our commission interviews, it was always location, location, location. But lately it's been neighborhood and neighbors more than, and I see that this is probably what people say, but I think that it maybe would be interesting to have somehow differentiate that. We have no control over the church, workplace, or really school district. So maybe it's more what we're asking for in, please tell me which of the following you feel the closest connection to the city of Roseville as a whole. How is that different than 4? And are we, I don't know. I just feel like 9 feels a little clunky. I agree with that. And so I'm thinking maybe somewhat we're asking that question in 4 about what's most important to you.
Yeah, I think 9 could go away and be revised. I will trust some other wording coming back that's appropriate and not.
Well, it sounds like it's about the city anyway. So if we're looking how to align it with vision, that seems like a good,
Yeah.
as good anyone to do.
So how do people feel about removing 9 then? It sounds like, or replacing 9.
Replacing.
I think
And keeping
replace-
4
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
tweaking 4. And how does that, I think we'd still want to check with the survey folks about how
Right.
how they respond to that too, because I'm a little concerned that we lose something if we do the change and then they say, oh, but
But that,
such and
yeah.
such. Not that that couldn't be part of the follow-up communication.
But I think Councilmember Bauer's point was good to break that down too, so I noticed there were other questions that had follow-up things, where would you rate vibrancy, whatever they are, I don't know, maybe it could be done that way.
Well, we definitely got rid of 7 questions, so we've
We
got the
did.
opportunity to add some more in.
Well, it wouldn't have to be a whole question, it could be a subset
Yeah.
on that one.
Right.
Well, and I think still, maybe including 10 in there as well, because that one is, how do you feel welcome?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that could be part of the revamp, group. Is that, we're breaking it out between.
Well, and I don't want to assume that how people feel as far as welcome and how that relates to inclusiveness
Yeah.
No.
are the same or not. So
Yeah, and that's where we have.
so we may have to look at sort of the city strategy question or the city objective question as somehow either incorporating into existing questions, especially about safety, and or adding a couple of new questions to break it down like was suggested.
Or,
But I think the strategy makes sense.
Yeah.
or an 11A or a revamp of 11 could be, how could that be improved? Or, maybe somebody has a really specific idea. I mean, there's always the
Well, and
unsure, but
I think, if I'm not mistaken, 11 is a free-form answer, so it's
That's
just
correct.
what we hear. But
Oh,
certainly you could ask
interesting.
a different question to
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
the answers you want. But I think, once again, I think we've got a sense of where the council would like to go on this, and I don't know that the intent is to reword questions here
Not
in this
exactly.
discussion this evening, right? Yeah.
So then the next question is question 13. So question 13 is a little bit of background here. Question 13 is really forward thinking. It's an important question, but the conversation around this question was really, could we improve it to make it a little bit more specific to the strategic plan? So what it's currently asking is really about what are the things that in the future should be fixed? Is there a way we could potentially reword it to, what areas should the city prioritize in the next 5 years to improve quality of life or something to that effect? It's trying to get at the same thing, but maybe tie it more specifically to our strategic plan. Don't know how to word it specifically, but, again, looking for council feedback, but also would maybe hope the survey company would let us know if maybe you can just use this question or
Well,
if it
definitely
ne-
13 is a what's wrong question.
Yeah.
And 14 is a what is missing question, and maybe you can combine that into a what is the vision for the next future of the city? Because I don't, I mean, maybe it's important to have a what's wrong question. I don't want to
Yeah.
don't want to presume. And these are both also free-form answers, as I understand it. That we're
Yes.
we're not suggesting a list.
And there is question number 5 is more of a short-term, what is the current challenge that we're facing? So we do have kind of an immediate what needs to be addressed, and then this 13 is more of a in the future
Right, the
kind of
longer term,
forward looking.
right. And I would say that's 13 and 14, once again, are both sort of that looking forward, longer term. Because we're not gonna put in what's missing on day one necessarily.
I do have a concern if we put it trying to force or direct them towards just what we have in the strategic plan. Is we're kind of assuming that those are the only categories. What I do enjoy about these 13 and 14 is, as the mayor pointed out, that they are open, and because I don't presume that all those items on the strategic plan, while they are broad, cover everything that a resident may have a concern with or enjoy.
So
So,
co-
you can word it different ways, but as you do that, just try
Open-ended.
not to just limit the choices.
And once
Yes.
again, it may be an additional question and
Yeah,
not
I was-
changing
Yeah,
these questions.
Yeah,
Maybe
additional would be fine.
I think additional would be better, because you don't want to try to steer them into a funnel of only our strategic plan. I think that's a good point, where
Well,
that somebody might think of something we hadn't thought about that we want to have on,
But I think that
attention.
the intent was for it to still be an open-ended question.
Yes,
That
well,
we're not-
that's what I
We're not trying to pre-select answers.
Well, that's why I said if we're trying to make it, tailor it to reflect our strategic plan, that would
Right, but
tailor it.
the question I think that was proposed was, identify community priorities tied to the strategic plan. So is there?
Yeah, see, the
No.
tied to the
Yeah.
strategic plan.
Maybe it's
So-
better to just say community
Yeah,
priorities.
see,
Yeah.
that's the
Yes.
part where
Yeah.
I think you want to make it wide enough so if somebody has something else that they're concerned about.
Or that it's the things we're looking at in the future, or the things that
Yeah.
that are priorities to make the community more vibrant, safe, and inclusive. I mean, because
So
that
that-
gets back to the objective.
The suggestion was really tied to quality of life, because our mission is that we want to provide a high quality of life. And so it was something along the lines of what areas should we prioritize to improve quality of life in the next 5 years.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, that would be.
So,
that
and
would-
I don't know if
Right.
that's the
Yeah,
appropriate
without
one.
saying the
Yep.
strategic plan,
Right,
don't say
yeah,
that.
Yep.
in there.
I think that's more the inside
Yeah.
language,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
yeah.
If we do want to include more of the strategic plan, I think a question that'd be worth adding is, are you aware the city has the strategic plan?
Yeah, that, and have it as a separate item, yeah.
I mean, I don't know. if
That might
it's
be
worth
too
it,
early to ask that question.
Yeah.
But right, I agree with
Because
that.
I think we're tailoring questions to help us measure things that we're talking about in our strategic plan, but we're not using the strategic plan words as part of the survey, as
Yeah.
far as I
Right.
understand it. Right.
which is important. As long as we don't do that, then
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
we'll get a better. Share.
So I think actually, once again, this might be a new question thing, in addition to 13 and 14, and 4 and 5.
I think that 15, 16, and 17 might be challenging for people to be able to hold a list of 10 different people, different options in their mind on the phone without seeing it, just because so many people are visual learners at this point. So I don't know if there's a way to take similar information, obtain similar information in a more phone interview friendly way that maybe the surveyor could recommend. I think it's helpful information, but at the same time, to ask the same question with
Right, but they do ask it 3 times, and they take out the ones that they identify. so
still
they
a
get
lot
to
of
hear
things
them
for
again.
people to.
Yeah, but that's okay, yeah.
It seems to have worked before.
Yeah, I
yes.
like it, I'd keep it.
And the list they're referring to, I believe, is the answers to 14. right?
Yeah, and
And so the second person that gets the survey has a list of 1, or whatever, a list of whatever the first person said.
Yeah.
no, the list of 17 is the list.
No,
No.
Read a list of characteristics other. Please tell me which of those.
others have mentioned that indicate a city has a high quality of
I,
life.
I do believe it is the list under 17 that is listed.
Is it?
I do
from-
believe so.
From previous?
Oh,
yeah.
I
So it's from
didn't. I
previous
didn't scroll down
surveys.
far enough. I apologize.
It's just a lot of words to hold in your mind while you consider how it relates to the next thing.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I have a sociology degree and have done a lot of surveys, so it just kind of got that in my brain. So
Sure.
that's why I thought maybe someone who specializes in it could.
And that's who came up with this question originally, was the survey
Yeah,
experts.
but best practice over time may have changed. I wanted to make sure in 25 that maybe we added something about bike trails or walking trails, because there's mention of trails for exercise or trails connecting neighborhoods, trails connecting shopping and business. I guess I didn't really see anywhere else where it would mention, people could have an opinion about biking trails or walking trails.
Isn't that what the trails are saying? Isn't that walking and bike all the trails?
Maybe it needs to just be clear that it would be both.
Question 54 does talk about bikeways.
And that section that you just mentioned, City Manager Trudgeon, is the next suggestion is to add under that question where it says, for each of the following long-term infrastructure projects, please tell me if you strongly support the city continuing to invest in, somewhat support, somewhat oppose, or strongly oppose. Our Public Works Director had suggested adding in sustainability and environmental projects. I don't know if that is a 1 or a 2 item, but those were those suggestions there.
Yeah, that makes sense because that has been something I hear a lot from residents.
Right. And that is a public worksy kind of question.
Yep.
To coin a phrase.
To use a technical term, public worksy.
So back to sort of the items that the staff was bringing forward, I think that discussion about questions, whatever it was, 13, 14, I'm losing track.
13, 14, yeah.
I think the general thought was that we probably want to most likely keep 13, 14 as they are and then add a question about that gets to the priorities. Okay. And then what was the next?
51,
51.
55.
51 through
So we just did
55.
that. Okay, so we're on track. Okay.
And then also the next section for your consideration are questions 77 through 83. Get down to that for you.
Oh, the housing.
Yep, it's related to housing, and I have to pull up my notes real quick. Okay, so this one, the current question is that I'd like to read you a list of characteristics of a community. For each one, please tell me if you think Roseville currently has too many, too much, too few, too little, or about the right amount. The conversation around this was maybe shifting the focus from what's the perceived quantity of housing types to are the housing types adequately serving residents' needs? And so, again, this is, I don't know if the wording of my question is correct, but thinking about your current and future housing needs as well as the needs of residents across different life stages, this might be too wordy. How well do you feel the variety of housing options are meeting needs in each of these following areas? So it would be maybe just a different intro to that question and leave the list, but it was really about shifting the focus of the perceived quantity versus are we meeting the needs to tie into some of those the goals that could help inform some of the programs that we might have if there's certain areas where we aren't meeting needs.
I like that. I actually had this one circled too as something that was of concern. I feel like a lot of people don't have a real recent filter. And so they're like, oh, yeah, we just keep building senior facilities. And we really haven't had a ton of senior facilities going up in the last couple of years. So we have many, but I think it's good to maybe frame it in a way that doesn't meet the needs of you and your family, or, kind of frame it in a way that it's like, okay, well, you don't get to decide if there are currently too many affordable housing units because you're not going to get rid of them because you don't like them. But how can we find what suits your needs moving forward? If you're downsizing or upgrading, I appreciated that thought too of 89 and 90.
As opposed to, are there too many for other people?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it adequate for you and your needs? And I think that does make more sense maybe to ask people
Or
about.
too many in general, because
Right.
what is,
Well, I
if
mean,
you've been here a long time.
my implication was too many for other people, because really
Yeah.
that's kind of what
I get
what
it.
you might be saying, because certainly any given household only needs one of whatever they might
Right.
want.
Would we want to include short-term rental?
I don't know if that's a housing type that we're looking, I mean, that, that's sort of a lodging type.
I guess
does-
We have enough hotels.
It does pull away from housing, though, if some of the housing stock is used for short-term rentals or for long-term rentals, it does pull away from permanent long-term housing for others.
That would almost then be back to a too much, too few
Yep.
question as opposed to a what are your needs question.
True enough.
It's a general feeling on the council about the change to the format of this series of questions.
I like the proposed change of direction, but still getting the information in a way that's more about what do I need or how will I utilize the stock that's available or needs to be available. But it does include here service and retail establishments, which
And I think we may be able to potentially split out some of the ones that go away from the housing to have a different intro. You
Okay.
could keep the too much, too few if you want to. You keep that for parks, open space, trails, service, retail establishment. If you wanted to keep that same intro for certain pieces of it, we could potentially do that.
Yeah, it is interesting that we combined a bunch of things together there.
They are a little disparate.
Like a bunch of choices of different types of housing, and then
Right.
a broad category for parks and open spaces, and a
Right.
broad category for four other things. Yeah,
Entertainment and dining.
yeah, yeah. There may be some ways we can
Tweak that a little.
do a housing needs question and then an other things question. Does that make sense from everybody's point of view?
I think it'd be nice to move that out of the housing and talk just about housing in that area.
All right.
So the next category are questions that we don't really have a very specific question currently in the survey for, so we called these new questions. So the first one would be to potentially add a question related to overall, how safe and secure do you feel living in Roseville? That could be one that's tied to safety. We have several qualitative success indicators under our responsive and safety services priority. So understanding kind of how safe do you feel? You could potentially do a follow-up of why do you feel that way, or what could improve that. I'm not quite sure under the survey methodology which one would be best suited. And that, again, ties a little bit to Council Members Bauer comment about splitting out the vibrant, safe, and inclusive community to have safe as a separate question as well.
Yeah, so we really, in the questions that are in the survey, get quite a bit into specific questions about specific areas of safety and things like that, but we don't have that overall question. Is that kind of what the thinking from leadership was?
Mm-hmm.
I'm comfortable with that.
All right.
I think it's really, I mean, they've done this repeatedly in the questions. It's in Roseville, when you're thinking of Roseville, referring to Roseville. Because sometimes when you ask a question, people go like, yeah, it's really bad out there. I see all these things on TV and I watch these crime shows. And I said, but think about Roseville. Because,
Yeah.
and then when usually you get to local, then it's like, well, you know, yeah, there might be an
They
issue. But
look at all the cities, not just Roseville.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
I like the new questions, and I think a lot of them address things that we've talked about already in other places. The fifth one, how well do you feel? I think it would come up with kind of well, not well, really well. I feel like you could maybe, how can city services respond to the evolving needs of Roseville residents? Where you are actually asking for a suggestion, where you're actually asking for an action of people, what thing do you think would be helpful?
Well, and I think you may still want the the sort of the broad, the general question about kind of thumbs up, thumbs down.
Right.
And then maybe the follow-up question is where could we improve?
Well, and don't we ask that in like plowing and,
Yeah, I mean, it could be worked into that, one or more of those sections as a lead-off question.
The other questions that are up there is asking about the transportation options. One of our goals talks about multimodal transportation, so trying to gather feedback on how the transportation options within the city are meeting needs. We did cover kind of the housing options under that blue question up there, so I think that one is one that we can take off there. Wondering if council feels that there's worthwhile to ask if there are housing challenges, and again, not sure how to specifically word it, but if there are housing challenges, whether it's a follow-up question, what are those challenges? Or what isn't, I'm not exactly sure, but we could potentially have a follow-up to some of those housing questions if need be.
Sure.
And then we discussed the responsive services question.
And the housing challenges, you keep it open, I split between just keeping it open-ended and also somehow limiting it to things that are within our control. And I don't think you're going to be able to do that, so I think you're going to just end up leaving it wide open. But if for some reason that you figure it out or the survey writers figure that out, that'd be appreciated. But probably don't.
Well, it hasn't been unusual in past surveys to get some responses that, for instance, relate to something that the school district is responsible for, or something
Yes.
like that in the free form. And I think, our obligation at that point is to pass that along to the leadership of whoever is responsible for that.
Are we getting this survey longer? Because one of my concerns is we want to keep this short. I think 22 minutes. I know when I answer a phone and they say 22 minutes, I go like, no, I don't have time, sorry.
Yeah, we don't want them if we can stay within the 130 questions or less, I think that would be, yeah,
That's our goal.
that's the goal.
Yeah.
Thankfully, we took out 7, so.
Yep, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
I would like to, 130, it says gender, do not ask. So is it making an assumption based on the voice?
I don't have the answer to that question. I noticed that as well, and so I'm not 100% sure what that is. I don't know the answer to that question.
I mean, I think in this day and age, we really should ask somebody. If you're going to include it as a thing, we should ask what gender they identify as. And if they don't identify as the binary, then we need to make other or, I don't know. I just think people have an expectation that you aren't making an assumption based on their voice or what their name is, because often you're wrong.
Yeah, I believe it's not an assumption based on something like that. I would almost be positive that the company can confirm that it's from other demographic data that's tied to their account or their phone number or their
Which
name.
may or may not be current.
Yeah, and I don't know how they get their data on how they figure out which phones to call. I'm not sure, but I'm sure that they have some sort of database that is in there, and that is something that is probably tied to that. So because they have to also do a sample that is representative of the demographics that we have. So I don't know exactly how they do that, but
That
we
very
could,
well just could be the demographic breakdown of Roseville. And so they know what that is, and they match the sample to that then.
but we can definitely ask that question so that they are prepared to answer that when they do this.
It's good.
And I think as it relates to all the demographics, if I remember right, if their sample doesn't completely match the actual demographics, they have ways to weight the answers as
Correct.
they statistically evaluate everything to account for that.
So the final question for council is, are there questions that are not in the survey that you would like to see, or are there other things that you don't think need to be in the survey?
Council?
I didn't see any. I think it's important to have some continuity in there. We are making quite a few changes, and if it's going to be statistically something that we can use to compare to the past, we don't want to get it way off filter.
I would agree.
Right. All right. Very good.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ms. Olson, as well as all the leadership team that's been involved in this process up to this point, and we look forward to the thoughts that come out of the consultations with the survey company, and the council will have opportunities to weigh in at that point, and look forward to the final outcome.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, that brings us to future agenda review. Mr. Trudgeon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One more meeting in May, next Monday. We have three proclamations to start off the meeting. We will hold a public hearing to consider certifying unpaid utility and other charges, the property tax roll. Most likely, we'll be dealing with considering a cancellation of a Center Point Medical Building planned unit development. There's looking to be some different development there, and so under our ordinances, we need to officially cancel that portion of the PUD. And we'd be looking to award the Nature Playground consultant contract. So fairly light meeting overall. We do stack them up in June. We do have a couple, only 2 meetings in June, and they're fairly busy. On the 8th, we'd consider the Willow Pond Environmental Assessment worksheet approval. This is the required environmental review for the dredging of Willow Pond. It's been in the works for quite a while, so this is a step that will complete that review process. I think I've communicated to the council before, but we anticipate potential understanding of the VFW's acceptance of our offer at the end of May, so we would look to consider bringing forward the purchase agreement with the VFW in the June 8th meeting. We also want to have the Parks Department here to talk about an update on the Autumn Grove Playground planning process that's ongoing here. Right now, we're looking to have a joint meeting with the Finance Commission and receive presentation from Commissioner Mary Jo McGuire. I've been trying to balance these agendas, and so this is kind of where I'm at right now, but there's a lot there on that meeting. The 15th, we have a minor plat. I think it's mostly a lot split at 2816 Oxford Street. We do want to spend the majority of the time, if we can, about the civic campus concept plans, assuming we get the purchase agreement taken care of. And also, Finance Director Magaranu will be here to have a presentation of the popular financial report, something he's been working on. So this is a brand new thing that we want to do. And hopefully, in light of trying to make things more transparent and understandable for people, this is a better way to share the information we have here. And then I have a bunch of June events. June is a very busy month. Let's see. That's what I have.
All right. Are there questions on the future agenda review or items council members would like to suggest for future agendas? Or reports, announcements, communications from council members?
Thanks, everybody, for coming to the NYFS luncheon. It was very successful. I don't have final numbers, but it was well attended, and we had good speakers. Appreciate it.
Great speakers, great stories, testimonials.
Yeah.
That was a really good event.
Do want to remind folks of the Community in Bloom event in the Rice and Larpenteur Alliance area at McCarran's Park on Saturday. We're hoping that it's going to be good weather for that, at least early enough in the day for this event. I believe it's from like 11 to 2 or 3 or something along
It's
those
noon,
lines.
isn't it?
It may be noon. Yep. I didn't. I intended to look it up before the meeting started, but here we are. So thank you. But certainly, if you showed up at the park early, you could probably find something to do. They might even need help setting up. So a perfect opportunity to
Totally get
contribute to the
parking spot.
community. Right. Exactly. Exactly. All right. If there's Councilmember.
Thank you to the Rosedale Police Department and in cooperation with the other police departments in the area who did the lights on presentation at the Rosedale Mall on Saturday. It was very windy out there, but it was a really lovely display, a lot of families, and I won a bike and gave it to a very small child because I really didn't need a child's bike, but it was really lovely, and so thanks to all of the folks involved, but really excited about the Lights On program, and if you're not aware of it, do take a look, and that the City of Roseville participates and took the lead on having this really large, well-run event.
All right. With that, we are not quite to the end of our agenda this evening, but I do want to note for people watching at home, as well as for the folks in the control booth, that the next part of our meeting, the closed session, or presumed closed session, for purposes of reviewing the performance of the city manager, will be happening off camera and not in the council chambers. And we will still, by legal requirements, have to reconvene in open session before we formally adjourn the meeting, but that will also happen off camera, but it will be accessible to the public in the room that we're in. So once we act on the potential motion to close the meeting to go to that subject matter, we'll be going off camera at that point. So just want to make folks in the public as well as in the control room aware of that. That brings us then to considering adjourning to a closed session of the City Council for the purposes of conducting a performance review of the city employee who is the city manager. That is the employee that reports to the City Council under our Plan B form of government. Under Minnesota Statutes 13D.05 Subdivision 3, that talks about the exceptions to the open meeting law. By law, city councils, among other government bodies, are supposed to conduct all their business in the open and in public and accessible to the public. But there are some exceptions that are allowed under state law in that section. In paragraph A, it does talk about the ability to close meetings to do that performance review purpose of an employee that reports to the council. As I mentioned, in this case, it is City Manager Pat Trudgeon. Part of that statute does require us to hold the review in open session if so requested by the subject of the review. And so I will check with the subject of the review. Mr. Trudgeon, do you wish to require that we hold your review in open session?
I do not.
All right, thank you, Mr. Trudgeon. With that, then, I believe I have covered the requirements and the announcements that I need to make in relation to this. I've said who it is. I've cited the statutory authority. I've asked if he wants it in the open. So I think we are ready to entertain a motion to, for the moment, adjourn the open session and go to a closed executive session for that purpose. Subsequent motions will happen after that.
So moved.
All right. Moved by Councilmember Groff. We'll take that as a second by Councilmember Schroeder to expedite the process here. Is there any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of short-term adjournment of the open session to go to that closed session to do the performance review of the city manager signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye opposed. That passes unanimously. And at 7:53, we are adjourned to closed session.